The silk of the dress felt like spiderwebs against Alara's skin. It was a Vera Wang, costing more than the remaining balance in her father's primary checking account. As she stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her childhood bedroom, she didn't see a bride, she saw a sacrificial lamb. Her mother's voice fluttered behind her, breathless and high-pitched. "You look divine, Alara. The Thorns are pleased. This settles everything." Settles everything, Alara thought bitterly. It settled the bank's notices. It settled the whispers at the yacht club. But it didn't settle the cold lump of dread in her stomach. She was 24, a talented painter with dreams of a studio in Florence, now being traded like a piece of blue-chip stock. She thought of Julian Thorne. She had met him twice. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous, sharp jawline, eyes like flint, and a silence that felt heavy. He hadn't smiled once. He hadn't even looked at her. He had looked at the spreadsheets her father presented. "He doesn't want me," Alara whispered to her reflection. "He doesn't have to want you," her mother snapped, her face momentarily losing its polished mask. "He just has to marry you. Smile, Alara. Our lives depend on it." As she walked down the stairs, the grandeur of the Vance estate felt like a lie. The gold leaf was peeling if you looked closely enough. She was the glue meant to hold the ruins together. Every step toward the waiting limousine felt like a step away from her own life. She wasn't Alara anymore. She was an asset. The ceremony was a blur of camera flashes and expensive perfume. Julian Thorne stood at the altar like a statue carved from ice. When he took her hand, his skin was warm, but his grip was clinical. There was no tremor of nerves, no spark of affection. "You're shaking," he murmured, so low only she could hear. It wasn't a comfort, it was an observation. "I'm cold," she lied. "Lie better," he replied, his gaze fixed on the priest. "The cameras are watching." During the reception, they sat at the head table like two beautiful mannequins. Julian spent half the time responding to emails on a sleek black phone hidden beneath the linen napkin. He didn't ask her to dance. He didn't ask about her day. He treated the entire wedding as a tedious board meeting that had run over schedule. Alara watched her father laughing with Julian's father across the room. They looked relieved. They had traded their children's freedom for a line of credit, and they were celebrating the bargain. "I know why you're doing this," Alara said, turning to Julian as the music swelled. "Your father told mine, you need the stability of a wife to keep your chair at Thorne Enterprises." Julian finally looked at her. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "And you are here because your father spent his way into a hole he couldn't climb out of. We are both here because we failed to be independent, Alara. Don't act as if you're the only victim of this arrangement." The honesty was a slap to the face. It was the first real thing anyone had said to her all day. The penthouse was a masterpiece of glass and steel, overlooking the city lights. It was beautiful, sterile, and silent. "This is your wing," he said, gesturing to a hallway on the left. "My suite is on the right. We share the kitchen and the living area. I leave for the office at 5 a.m. I return late. I don't expect you to play the doting wife behind closed doors." Alara dropped her clutch on the marble counter. "So, what am I? A ghost in your house?" "You are a thorn now," he said, loosening his tie with a weary tug. "Spend the money, go to the galas, maintain the image. Beyond that, I don't care what you do." He turned to leave, but Alara stopped him. "Why me? There were dozens of women who would have fought to be in this position, women who actually like you." Julian paused, his back to her. "Because you looked like you hated the idea as much as I did. I figured you wouldn't try to turn this into something it isn't." He walked away, leaving her alone in the vast, cold space. Alara felt a strange mix of anger and relief. He didn't love her, but he didn't expect her to love him either. It was a business deal, pure and simple. She walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the glass and cried. Not for the marriage she lost, but for the girl who used to believe she could paint her own future. Weeks passed in a rhythmic, lonely cycle. Alara filled the silence of the penthouse with the smell of oil paints. She set up an eagle in the corner of the living room where the light was best, expecting Julian to complain about the mess. He never did. He was a shadow. She would hear the coffee machine at dawn and the soft click of the front door at midnight. Occasionally, they were required to attend events together. They would dress in coordinated outfits, link arms, and smile for the photographers. Julian was a master of the protective husband act, his hand resting firmly on the small of her back. But the moment they stepped back into the elevator of their building, the mask dropped, the hand would fall away, and the silence would return. One night, Alara was still painting when he came home. She was covered in streaks of Prussian blue and burnt umber. Julian stopped, staring at the canvas. It was a dark, abstract piece, a storm over a glass city. "Is that how you see it?" he asked, his voice startling her. "See what?" "The world. Everything looks like it's about to shatter." Alara wiped her hands on a rag. "It's how I feel. Everything is so perfect on the surface, Julian, but underneath, it's just chaos." He stayed there for a long minute, looking at her art, before retiring to his room without another word. It was the first time they'd shared a moment that wasn't about their parents or their public image. The first real crack happened during a dinner with Julian's father, Arthur Thorne. Arthur was a man who breathed intimidation. Throughout the meal, he belittled Julian's recent merger and made snide comments about Ilara's hobby. "Paintings won't produce an heir, Ilara. You should focus on charities, something that adds value to the Thorne name." Julian's jaw tightened. Alara felt a surge of heat in her chest. She looked at Julian and saw the tension in his shoulders, the same tension she felt when her own parents called to ask for more money. "Actually, Arthur," Alara said, her voice steady, "my painting is the only thing in this family that isn't a performance. Maybe the Thorne name could use a bit of authenticity." The table went dead silent. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Julian looked at her, stunned. On the car ride home, Alara braced herself for Julian to yell at her for offending his father. Instead, when the privacy glass went up, he let out a short, sharp laugh. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to say something like that." "Why didn't you?" Alara asked. "Because he owns the company. He owns the house. He owns the air I breathe." Julian looked out the window, his expression vulnerable for a split second. "Until I've secured enough shares, I'm just a puppet." "We are both puppets," Alara whispered. Julian reached out, his hand hesitating before covering hers. This time, it wasn't for the cameras. He said, "Maybe, but puppets can cut their strings." After that night, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable. They started having dinner together. Real dinner, not just protein bars and coffee. They made a pact. They would help each other. Alara would play the perfect socialite to help Julian secure his shares, and Julian would secretly fund a private gallery showing for her work under a pseudonym. "If my father knows it's you, he'll shut it down," Julian explained, looking over her latest sketches. "But if E.V. Rossi is a success, you'll have your own money. You won't need your parents, and you won't need me." "And what about you?" Alara asked. "Once I have control, I can run the company the way I want. No more fear, no more arranged stability." They were working towards their own divorces, essentially. It was a strange goal to share, but it bonded them. They became partners in a heist where the prize was their own lives. One evening, while helping her move a large canvas, Julian's hand brushed her cheek. They both froze. The air between them suddenly felt electric, thick with a question neither was ready to ask. Julian pulled away first, but the look in his eyes wasn't cold anymore. It was terrified. He was realizing that the ghost in his house was becoming the only person he wanted to see. The E.V. Rossi gallery opening was a triumph. Alara watched from the shadows of the room as critics praised her work. Julian stood by her side, his presence a grounding force. "You did it," he whispered. "The sales tonight. Alara, you're free." She should have felt ecstatic. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She had enough money now to leave, to fly to Florence, to end the charade. But as she looked at Julian, who had defended her, supported her, and truly seen her, the thought of leaving felt like a weight. "I don't feel free," she admitted. "Why not?" "Because I'd be leaving you behind with them." Julian's expression softened. He led her to the balcony, away from the crowd. "I got the final shares today, Alara. My father can't touch me anymore. I'm the majority owner." They were both free. The deal was done, the bankruptcy was averted, the company was secured, and the marriage had served its purpose. "So," Julian said, his voice husky, "I guess we call the lawyers tomorrow?" Alara looked up at him, the city lights reflected in his eyes. "Is that what you want?" Julian stepped closer, his hand finally settling on his waist, pulling her into his face. "It's what I thought I wanted. But now, the thought of this penthouse being silent again is the worst thing I can imagine." "I don't want to be a ghost anymore, Julian," she whispered. "Then don't be," he said, and he leaned down, kissing her with a desperation that told her he had been holding back for months. This wasn't a business deal. This was a choice. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows felt different the next morning. It wasn't a spotlight on a crime scene. It was a warm invitation. Alara woke up in Julian's room, the scent of expensive cologne and cedarwood surrounding her. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of her family's debt didn't sit on her chest. She found Julian in the kitchen, not looking at his phone, but staring at the coffee maker. He looked uncharacteristically disheveled, his hair messy and his shirt untucked. When he saw her, a slow, genuine smile broke across his face, a look he had never given a photographer. "I didn't dream that, did I?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "The kiss, or the fact that we're both officially free of our fathers?" Alara asked, sliding onto the stool beside him. "Both," he said, taking her hand. "But freedom is a terrifying thing, Alara. I've spent my whole life being told where to stand and who to be. I realized last night that I don't know how to be a husband, a real one." "I don't know how to be a wife," she admitted, "but I think we're already better at being us than we were at being them." The moment was interrupted by Julian's phone buzzing aggressively on the counter. It was his father. The bubble of peace didn't burst, but it thinned. "He knows about the shares," Julian said, his eyes hardening. "And your father is calling me too. They've realized the puppets have started walking on their own." Alara squeezed his hand. "Let them call. We have a different meeting to attend today." The boardroom of Thorn Enterprises was cold, but Alara felt a fire in her veins. Arthur Thorn sat at the head of the table, flanked by Alara's father, who looked pale and frantic. "You think you're clever, Julian," Arthur spat, throwing a folder onto the table. "And you, Alara, using Thorn money to fund your little art project?" "It wasn't Thorn money," Julian said, his voice like tempered steel. "It was my personal capital, and Alara's work has already paid back every cent. As for the board, they didn't need manipulation. They needed a leader who wasn't stuck in the 1980s. Alara's father turned to Alara, his voice trembling. "Alara, talk to him. If the Thorns pull their support, the Vance name is finished. We'll lose the house, the reputation, everything." Alara looked at the man who had traded her for a check. "The Vance name was finished the moment you valued your social standing over your daughter's happiness, Dad. I've already set up a trust for you and Mom. You won't be on the street, but the empire is gone. It's over." The look of shock on her father's face was painful, but liberating. She wasn't their savior anymore. She was a person. "You two are making a mistake," Arthur hissed. This romance won't last. You were forced together. You'll grow to loathe the sight of each other. Julian stood up, pulling Alara to her feet. Actually, Arthur, being forced together was the only thing you ever did for me that I'm grateful for. Now, get out of my office. Watching their parents leave the building felt like watching a storm recede. The silence that followed wasn't the lonely silence of their early marriage. It was the quiet of a new beginning. "You were amazing," Julian whispered, leaning his forehead against hers, in the empty boardroom. "I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my throat. Are you okay? You just fired your father." Julian took a deep breath. "I feel like I can finally breathe. For the first time in 30 years, I'm not waiting for a lecture. But we have a problem." "What's that?" "The press. They think we're the golden couple of the year. If we tell them the truth, that this was a sham marriage to save your family and secure my company, the stocks will plunge. It could ruin everything we just fought for." Alara looked at the city below. "Then we don't tell them the truth. Not all of it." "What do you mean?" "We tell them we're taking a sabbatical. We leave the city. No galas, no cameras, no Thorne and Vance legacy. Just Julian and Alara. If they see us actually living a life together, they'll stop looking for the cracks." Julian smiled, a mischievous glint in his eye. "A sabbatical, huh? I've never taken a vacation in my life." "Then it's about time you started," she laughed. "I know a place in Italy. There's a studio with your name on the lease. Well, a pseudonym's name." Before they could flee to Italy, Julian insisted on one thing: a real date. No press, no bodyguards, no five-star restaurants where the waiters knew their names. He showed up at the penthouse at 7 p.m. wearing jeans and a leather jacket. Alara was stunned. She had only ever seen him in bespoke Italian suits. "Where are we going?" she asked, grabbing a simple cardigan. "To a place where nobody cares who our fathers are." He took her to a small, neon-lit bowling alley on the edge of the city. They ate greasy pizza from paper plates and drank beer from plastic cups. Julian was surprisingly terrible at bowling, his competitive nature flaring up every time he hit the gutter. "I thought billionaires were good at everything," Alara teased after his third consecutive gutter ball. "I was trained in hostile takeovers, not physics with a heavy sphere," he grumbled, though he was laughing. They sat on the plastic benches, watching a group of teenagers celebrate a strike nearby. For the first time, they weren't the center of attention. They were just two people in love, lost in the noise of a normal Tuesday night. "I never thought I'd be this happy in a place that smells like floor wax," Julian said, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "It's not the place, Julian," Alara replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "It's the company." That night, they didn't talk about stocks or debt. They talked about their favorite colors, their fear of heights, and the names they wanted to give their future dogs. The peace was short-lived. 2 days before their flight to Italy, a tabloid leaked the original marriage contract, the one that detailed the financial bailout of the Vance family and the stability clause for Julian's CEO position. The headline was brutal: "A contracted coupling, the truth behind the Thorne-Vance merger." Reporters swarmed the lobby of their building. The internet was on fire with theories that their entire relationship was a lie. Julian's phone did not stop ringing. "They're going to tear us apart," Alara said, pacing the living room. "The board is already panicking. They think the stability I brought was a fraud." Julian was surprisingly calm. He was looking at the canvas Alara had painted of him, a portrait she'd done in secret, showing the softness he hid from the world. "Let them talk," Julian said. "They have the contract, but they don't have the current story." "What are you doing?" Alara asked as he began typing on his laptop. "I'm calling a press conference, but not a corporate one, a personal one. Alara, they think we're a business transaction. Let's show them we're a revolution." He looked at her with such conviction that her fear began to fade. They've spent their lives being written by other people. It was time to take the pen back. Are you ready to be honest? Truly honest? He asked. With you? Always, she said. The ballroom was packed with journalists, their cameras clicking like a swarm of insects. Julian and Alara walked on the stage hand in hand. They didn't look at the cameras, they looked at each other. Julian took the microphone. The document you saw is real, he began, causing a collective gasp in the room. He paused, his grip on Alara's hand tightening. But those families made a mistake. They thought they could control us. What they didn't realize is that by forcing us into the same room, they gave us the only thing we ever needed, a partner who understood what it was like to be a prisoner. Alara stepped forward. We didn't choose to meet this way, but we are choosing to stay. This isn't a merger anymore. It's a marriage. And if the board or the public finds our honesty unstable, then perhaps stability is overrated. She leaned in and kissed him, not the practiced, polite kiss of their wedding day, but a fierce, lingering kiss that spoke of every secret they'd shared and every bridge they'd burned. The room went silent. The cameras stopped clicking for a heartbeat. The narrative had shifted. It wasn't a scandal anymore. It was the ultimate act of defiance. 3 months later, the air was filled with the scent of lemon trees and salt water. The Tuscan sun warmed the stone walls of the villa Julian had bought, under his own name this time. Alara's studio was a dream of light and space. Canvases lined the walls, no longer abstract and dark, but vibrant with the colors of a life lived in the open. Her work was selling internationally, not because of her last name, but because of the raw emotion she poured into every stroke. Julian was working from a small desk in the corner, his laptop open, but his attention was on the view of the rolling hills. He had stepped down as CEO, taking a position as a consultant that allowed him to work 3 days a week. The workaholic had learned the value of a slow Tuesday. You're staring again, Alara said, not looking up from her palette. I'm admiring the view, Ray replied. The hills? No, he said, walking over to wrap his arms around her waist from behind. The artist. He tucked a straight hair behind her ear. There was no debt hanging over them, no parents demanding perfection, no contracts to fulfill. I heard from my mother yesterday, Alara said softly. She's actually enjoying the smaller house. She told me she finally had time to start a garden. I think losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to them too. Freedom looks good on everyone, Julian murmured. That evening, they sat on the terrace with a bottle of local wine. The sky was a bruise of purple and gold, the kind of sunset Alara used to try and capture when she felt trapped. Now she just enjoyed it. Do you ever regret it? Alara asked, watching the fireflies begin to dance in the olive grove. Julian laughed, a deep, easy sound. I traded a crown of thorns for a life with you, Alara. It was the best deal I ever made. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a giant, flashy diamond meant to impress stockholders. It was a simple, vintage band with an inscription inside. No more strings. I know we're already married, he said, his voice trembling slightly. But this time, I'm the one asking, not for the company and not for the image, just for me. Will you stay with me, Alara, for as long as we both want to? Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They weren't the Thorne-Vance merger anymore. They weren't a headline or a bankruptcy solution. They were just two people who had found a way to turn a cage into a home. As the stars came out over the Italian countryside, Alara realized that her life wasn't a tragedy or a transaction. It was a masterpiece, and she was finally the one holding the brush. If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire, teach, and entertain. Until next time, bye!